In the glittering world of haute couture, where every thread tells a story and every stitch carries meaning, there are moments that transcend fashion itself. Picture this: the most powerful monarch in the world, dressed not in ceremonial robes or military regalia, but in understated elegance, sitting beside one of fashion's most revolutionary designers. The cameras flash, the crowd holds its breath, and history unfolds in the most unexpected way. What happens when tradition meets rebellion? When a king who inherited centuries of protocol chooses to champion the woman who dared to make fashion sustainable? When the front row of London Fashion Week becomes the stage for a royal statement that would echo far beyond the runway? This is not just another royal appearance. This is the story of how King Charles III, in one bold move, rewrote the rules of royal engagement with fashion, sparked conversations about sustainability across the globe, and proved that sometimes the most powerful statements are made not with words, but with where you choose to sit and who you choose to sit beside. The date was February 2024. The venue was the heart of London's fashion district. And what unfolded that day would challenge everything the world thought it knew about royalty, fashion, and the power of authentic partnership. The morning mist hung over London like a silk veil as King Charles III prepared for what would become one of his most talked-about public appearances. Inside Clarence House, his private secretary reviewed the day's schedule with growing concern. Fashion Week was not typically on the royal calendar, and certainly not in the way His Majesty had planned it. Charles stood before his mirror, adjusting the navy wool blazer that had been tailored specifically for this occasion. The jacket was not from the usual royal couturiers, but from a sustainable fashion house that aligned with his environmental values. Every detail had been carefully considered, from the recycled buttons to the organic cotton lining. This was not just an outfit, it was a statement. The decision to attend Stella McCartney's show had not come lightly. For months, Charles had been quietly following the fashion industry's slow awakening to environmental responsibility. As someone who had championed sustainability decades before it became fashionable, he recognized a kindred spirit in Stella McCartney. She had built her entire brand on the principle that fashion could be both beautiful and ethical, refusing to use leather or fur long before such stances became mainstream. Their first meeting had been arranged through mutual connections in the environmental movement. Charles had been intrigued by reports of a major fashion designer who shared his passion for organic farming and sustainable practices. Stella, meanwhile, had long admired the king's pioneering work in environmental conservation, particularly his efforts to promote organic farming at Highgrove House. When they finally met at a private environmental summit in Scotland the previous autumn, the connection was immediate. Charles found himself engaged in animated conversations about soil health and biodiversity with someone who understood that fashion was not just about appearance, but about impact. Stella discovered that beneath the royal formality was a man who had been fighting the same battles she faced daily in her industry. The idea for the Fashion Week appearance had emerged organically from their discussions. Stella had mentioned the challenges she faced in convincing the fashion world to take sustainability seriously. Despite her success, she was often viewed as an outlier, her environmental stance seen as limiting rather than pioneering. Charles had listened thoughtfully, understanding the frustration of being ahead of one's time. "What if we could change that narrative?" he had suggested during one of their meetings. "What if we could show that sustainability and style are not opposing forces but natural partners?" The plan they developed was audacious in its simplicity. Charles would attend her London Fashion Week show, not as a ceremonial guest making a brief appearance, but as a genuine supporter sitting front row, engaging with the collection and the message behind it. The impact would be immediate and unmistakable. The morning of the show, London's fashion district buzzed with unusual energy. Word had spread through industry insiders that something significant was planned, though few knew exactly what. Fashion editors adjusted their schedules, photographers prepared their equipment, and sustainability advocates marked their calendars, all sensing that this day would be different. Stella arrived at her venue early, personally overseeing every detail. The collection she was presenting represented years of innovation in sustainable materials. She had developed new fabrics from mushroom leather, created dyes from food waste, and partnered with artisans who practiced traditional techniques that honored both craft and environment. Each piece told a story of responsible creation, but she wondered if the fashion world was ready to listen. Her team moved efficiently around the converted warehouse space that would host the show. The venue itself had been chosen for its sustainable features. Solar panels provided power, reclaimed materials formed the runway, and living walls of plants purified the air. Everything reinforced the message that fashion could work in harmony with nature rather than against it. Meanwhile, Charles made his way through London's streets, his convoy taking a route that would minimize environmental impact. His choice to attend this particular show had raised eyebrows within the royal establishment. Fashion Week was traditionally the domain of younger royals, if any royal attended at all. For a king to sit front row at a fashion show was unprecedented in modern times. But Charles had long made peace with being different from his predecessors. His entire life had been about using his position to champion causes he believed in, regardless of tradition. Climate change, organic farming, architectural preservation, interfaith dialogue, he had never shied away from taking stands that mattered to him. This appearance would be no different. As his car approached the venue, Charles could see the gathering crowd of photographers and fashion enthusiasts. The energy was palpable, a mixture of excitement and curiosity. He straightened his jacket one final time and prepared to step into a world that few royals had ever entered as genuine participants rather than ceremonial observers. The security detail had worked for weeks to ensure the appearance would be both safe and meaningful. Unlike typical royal events with cordoned areas and formal protocols, this would require Charles to navigate the informal, fast-paced world of fashion. He would need to move through crowds of industry professionals, sit among fashion editors and buyers, and participate in conversations that were far from scripted. Stella waited nervously backstage, reviewing her notes one final time. This collection represented everything she believed about fashion's potential to be a force for positive change. The partnership with Charles had added weight to the moment, but it had also added pressure. She knew that every eye would be watching, every critic ready to judge not just her designs, but the statement being made by royal attendants. The first guests began arriving, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Fashion Week attendees were accustomed to celebrity sightings and industry power plays, but the presence of a king at a fashion show promised something entirely different. Conversations buzzed with speculation about what this appearance might mean for both the royal family and the fashion industry. Charles's arrival created a respectful stir rather than the chaos often associated with celebrity appearances. He moved through the crowd with genuine interest, stopping to speak with sustainable fashion advocates, environmental journalists, and industry pioneers who shared his values. These were not the polite, surface-level conversations typical of royal events, but engaged discussions about shared interests and mutual goals. As he took his seat in the front row, beside other champions of sustainable fashion, Charles surveyed the scene before him. The runway stretched ahead, soon to showcase designs that proved fashion could be both aspirational and responsible. Around him sat individuals who were quietly revolutionizing an industry, often facing resistance from those more comfortable with traditional practices. The lights dimmed, and the show was about to begin. But already, simply by being present, Charles had made his statement. In a world where royal appearances were carefully managed and traditionally focused, he had chosen to align himself publicly with innovation, sustainability, and the future rather than the past. The conversation among the audience shifted from speculation to appreciation as they realized they were witnessing something significant. This was not a publicity stunt or a ceremonial obligation, but a genuine partnership between two individuals committed to using their platforms for positive change. The king had come not to be seen, but to see. Not to endorse superficially, but to understand deeply. As the first model appeared on the runway wearing a stunning gown made entirely from innovative plant-based materials, Charles leaned forward with genuine interest. His presence had already transformed the atmosphere of the show, from a fashion presentation to a statement about values, responsibility, and the power of authentic partnership. The stage was set for a collaboration that would extend far beyond this single event, laying the groundwork for conversations about sustainability that would reach every corner of the fashion world and beyond. As the first model glided down the runway, every person in the venue understood they were witnessing fashion history being made. The garment she wore appeared to shimmer like traditional silk, but Charles knew from his conversations with Stella that it was created entirely from orange peels and other citrus waste. This was innovation disguised as elegance, revolution wrapped in beauty. Charles found himself genuinely captivated by each piece that appeared. His decades of environmental advocacy had taught him to recognize authentic innovation versus superficial gestures, and what he saw before him was clearly the former. A structured blazer made from recycled ocean plastic moved down the runway with the same authority as any traditional design, while a flowing evening dress created from mushroom-based leather challenged every assumption about luxury materials. Beside him, fashion editors frantically took notes, not just about the designs, but about the king's reactions. They watched as he leaned forward to better examine the craftsmanship of a coat made from dead-stock fabrics, his genuine engagement evident to everyone present. This was not the polite attention often given by ceremonial guests, but the focused interest of someone who understood the significance of what they were seeing. Stella watched from backstage as her life's work unfolded before an audience that included not just fashion insiders but environmental advocates, sustainable business leaders, and now, remarkably, the monarch himself. Each model who walked represented months or even years of research and development. The purple dress created from grape waste had taken 18 months to perfect. The structured jacket made from recycled coffee grounds had required collaborations with waste management companies across 3 countries. The audience began to understand that they were not just watching a fashion show but witnessing a manifesto made visible. Every piece challenged the industry's traditional reliance on environmentally harmful practices while proving that sustainable alternatives could be just as luxurious, just as desirable, and just as commercially viable as conventional options. Charles noticed the technical innovation in every garment. A seemingly simple white shirt contained fibers made from eucalyptus trees grown in sustainably managed forests. An elegant handbag that appeared to be leather was actually crafted from pineapple leaves, a waste product from fruit farming that had been transformed into a luxury material. These were not compromises or substitutions but improvements, materials that were often more durable and beautiful than their traditional counterparts. The collaboration between designer and monarch had created something unprecedented in the fashion world. Charles's presence elevated the message beyond industry circles, while Stella's designs proved that sustainability was not about sacrifice but about innovation. Together, they were demonstrating that luxury and environmental responsibility were not opposing forces but natural partners. As the show progressed, the energy in the room shifted. What had begun as curiosity about royal attendance evolved into genuine appreciation for the collection itself. Fashion buyers who had attended out of professional obligation found themselves genuinely interested in the sustainable alternatives being presented. Environmental advocates who had long criticized the fashion industry saw evidence that change was possible. The final section of the show featured Stella's most ambitious pieces. A wedding dress made entirely from organic cotton grown without pesticides flowed down the runway like traditional silk. A men's suit created from recycled wool demonstrated that sustainable options could be just as sharp and professional as conventional tailoring. Each piece reinforced the message that conscious choices could enhance rather than limit creative possibilities. Charles watched with particular interest as models wearing workwear made from hemp and other sustainable fibers walked past. He recognized the potential for these innovations to impact not just high fashion, but everyday clothing, the kind worn by millions of people who might never attend Fashion Week, but who deserved clothing that was both affordable and environmentally responsible. The technology behind many of the pieces fascinated him. Stella's team had developed dyeing processes that used 90% less water than traditional methods. They had created manufacturing techniques that generated zero waste, with every scrap of fabric being repurposed into new products. The packaging for their products was made from mushroom-based materials that would decompose completely within months. As the show approached its climax, the atmosphere in the venue had transformed completely. What had begun as a fashion presentation had become a showcase of possibility. Conversations around Charles buzzed with excitement as industry professionals discussed the commercial potential of sustainable materials, the environmental impact of traditional manufacturing, and the market demand for responsible luxury goods. The finale featured Stella herself walking the runway alongside a team of artisans, textile innovators, and sustainability experts. She had chosen to wear a simple black dress made from recycled fibers, demonstrating that sustainability was not about flashy statements but about thoughtful choices integrated into everyday life. When the show ended, the applause was more enthusiastic and sustained than typical Fashion Week responses. The audience was not just appreciating a successful presentation but celebrating a vision of fashion's future that many had thought impossible to achieve without sacrificing beauty or desirability. Charles rose to his feet, leading a standing ovation that rippled through the venue. His reaction was not perfunctory royal politeness, but genuine admiration for what he had witnessed. The partnership with Stella had given him a platform to support innovations that aligned with his environmental values, while demonstrating the monarchy's commitment to addressing contemporary challenges. As the lights came up and the crowd began to mingle, Charles made his way backstage to congratulate Stella and her team personally. The conversations that followed were animated and substantive, focusing not on ceremonial pleasantries but on the practical applications of sustainable fashion. the potential for scaling these innovations, and the role that influential voices could play in accelerating positive change. Stella found herself in detailed discussions with the king about soil health and its relationship to textile production, about the potential for sustainable fashion to create economic opportunities in developing countries, and about the ways that consumer education could drive demand for responsible products. These were the conversations she had hoped for but rarely experienced in fashion industry settings. The impact of the event was immediate and far-reaching. Fashion Week attendees who had come expecting a traditional show found themselves reconsidering their assumptions about sustainability and style. Environmental advocates who had long criticized the fashion industry saw evidence that meaningful change was possible when innovation met genuine commitment. Social media exploded with images and videos from the show, but the conversation extended far beyond fashion. The presence of King Charles III at a sustainable fashion presentation became a talking point for discussions about royal modernization, environmental leadership, and the power of authentic partnerships between unlikely allies. Industry analysts quickly recognized that something significant had occurred. Orders for sustainable materials increased dramatically in the weeks following the show. Fashion schools began incorporating sustainability modules into their curricula. Investors started paying serious attention to companies developing innovative environmental alternatives to traditional fashion materials. The success of the event validated both Charles's decision to attend and Stella's belief that fashion could be a force for positive change. Their partnership had created a moment that transcended both royal tradition and fashion industry conventions, demonstrating that authenticity and shared values could create powerful platforms for advancing important causes. As the venue emptied and the immediate excitement subsided, both Charles and Stella understood that they had participated in something that would have lasting impact. The show had proved that sustainable fashion was not just possible, but desirable. Not just responsible, but beautiful. Not just necessary, but commercially viable. The foundation had been laid for ongoing collaboration that would extend far beyond Fashion Week, creating opportunities for continued innovation, education, and advocacy that would influence how both the royal family and the fashion industry approach their responsibilities to the environment and to future generations. The impact of King Charles III's appearance at Stella McCartney's sustainable fashion show reverberated far beyond the converted warehouse where it took place. Within hours of the event's conclusion, images and videos had circulated globally, sparking conversations that extended from fashion boardrooms to environmental organizations, from royal watching communities to sustainability advocates who had never previously paid attention to Fashion Week. The immediate response from the fashion industry was unprecedented. Buyers who had attended the show placed orders not just for individual pieces, but for entire sustainable collections. Fashion retailers who had previously been hesitant to stock environmentally responsible clothing suddenly found themselves competing to secure partnerships with sustainable designers. The commercial validation that Charles's presence provided had transformed what many viewed as a niche market into a mainstream opportunity. Within a week of the show, major fashion publications were featuring cover stories about sustainable luxury, with Charles and Stella's collaboration as the centerpiece. Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Elle all ran extensive features exploring the innovations showcased at the event and their potential to reshape the industry. These were not superficial trend pieces but in-depth analyses of how sustainable materials could replace traditional options without compromising quality or aesthetics. The environmental community responded with equal enthusiasm. Organizations that had long criticized the fashion industry for its environmental impact suddenly had a high-profile example of positive change to celebrate. The partnership between a king known for his environmental advocacy and a designer committed to sustainable practices provided a powerful narrative of hope and possibility. Charles himself was energized by the response. In the weeks following the show, he incorporated references to sustainable fashion into his other public appearances, using every opportunity to highlight innovations he had witnessed at Stella's presentation. During a speech about climate change at a university in Oxford, he spoke passionately about the orange peel silk he had seen on the runway, explaining how agricultural waste could be transformed into luxury materials. The royal household began implementing changes inspired by the Fashion Week experience. Staff uniforms were gradually replaced with versions made from sustainable materials. Official royal functions began featuring decorations and table settings created from environmentally responsible sources. The changes were subtle but meaningful, demonstrating that the commitment to sustainability extended beyond public appearances to daily practices. Stella found herself inundated with requests for collaborations, interviews, and partnerships. Fashion students from around the world applied to intern with her company, eager to learn about sustainable design practices. Textile manufacturers who had previously been uninterested in environmental alternatives suddenly wanted to discuss developing new materials. The validation provided by royal attention had transformed her from an outlier to a leader. The educational impact was equally significant. Fashion schools across Europe and North America began revising their curricula to include mandatory courses on sustainable design and environmental responsibility. Students who had entered the fashion world focused primarily on aesthetics and commercial success found themselves learning about supply chain ethics, environmental impact assessment, and innovative material development. 6 months after the Fashion Week appearance, Charles and Stella announced the establishment of a joint initiative focused on supporting emerging sustainable fashion designers. The program would provide funding, mentorship, and access to sustainable materials for designers committed to environmental responsibility. The initiative represented a formalization of their partnership and a commitment to creating lasting change rather than momentary attention. The program's first recipients were a diverse group of designers from around the world, each working on innovative approaches to sustainable fashion. The team from Kenya was developing textiles from pineapple waste, creating economic opportunities for farmers while reducing agricultural waste. Designers from India were perfecting techniques for dyeing fabrics using only natural materials and traditional methods that required minimal water. The ripple effects extended into unexpected areas. The automotive industry began exploring applications for some of the materials showcased at the fashion show, particularly the mushroom-based leather alternatives. Architecture firms started incorporating sustainable textiles into their designs for furniture and wall coverings. The innovations that had begun in fashion were finding applications across multiple industries. Consumer behavior shifted notably in the months following the show. Market research revealed increased demand for information about the environmental impact of clothing purchases. Retailers reported that customers were asking more questions about material sourcing, manufacturing processes, and end-of-life disposal options. The conversation had moved beyond price and style to include environmental responsibility as a significant purchasing factor. The success led to invitations for Charles to participate in other sustainable fashion events around the world. He accepted select opportunities that aligned with his environmental advocacy, appearing at sustainable fashion weeks in New York, Milan, and Tokyo. Each appearance reinforced the message that environmental responsibility was not just a trend but a necessary evolution of the fashion industry. Stella's business experienced unprecedented growth, but she remained committed to scaling responsibly. Rather than rapidly expanding production, she focused on developing new sustainable materials and partnering with other designers to share innovations. Her approach demonstrated that success in sustainable fashion required different metrics than traditional business models, prioritizing long-term environmental benefit over short-term profit maximization. The collaboration inspired other unlikely partnerships between traditional institutions and innovative designers. Museums began working with sustainable fashion companies to create exhibition pieces that demonstrated historical techniques using modern environmental standards. Universities partnered with fashion houses to research new sustainable materials and manufacturing processes. 2 years after the initial Fashion Week appearance, an independent study revealed that the event had contributed to a 40% increase in investment in sustainable fashion companies and a 60% increase in consumer awareness of environmental issues in clothing production. These were not just statistics, but evidence of meaningful change in how people thought about and purchased clothing. The partnership between Charles and Stella had evolved into a lasting friendship based on shared values and mutual respect. They continued to meet regularly, not for public events, but for private discussions about environmental challenges, innovative solutions, and strategies for creating positive change. Their relationship demonstrated that authentic partnerships could transcend differences in background and position when built on common purpose. The impact on the royal family's public perception was subtle but significant. Polling showed increased approval for Charles's environmental advocacy and appreciation for his willingness to use his position to support important causes. The Fashion Week appearance had demonstrated that royal influence could be used to advance substantive issues rather than just ceremonial functions. As the third anniversary of the Fashion Week appearance approached, both Charles and Stella reflected on how a single event had created lasting change. The show had proved that authentic partnerships, genuine commitment to shared values, and willingness to take risks could create impact that extended far beyond immediate audiences. The sustainable fashion industry that had been struggling for mainstream acceptance before their collaboration was now a significant and growing sector. New designers entered the field regularly, armed with better materials, clearer market demand, and proof that environmental responsibility and commercial success were compatible rather than contradictory. The story of King Charles III and Stella McCartney's Fashion Week collaboration had become more than just a moment of royal modernization or fashion innovation. It had become evidence that when influential voices choose to support meaningful causes, the impact can extend far beyond what anyone initially imagines possible, creating ripples of positive change that continue long after the initial moment has passed. Their partnership demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful statements are made not through speeches or proclamations, but through choices about where to show up, who to support, and which values to champion publicly. In choosing to sit front row at a sustainable fashion show, Charles had made a statement that resonated around the world and helped reshape an entire industry's approach to environmental responsibility.